And you're right, when agreements aren't implemented, we always go back and we always raise them again. But it's a fresh negotiation. Understand that the things that haven't been implemented have a process of their own against what the negotiations are in the new year. And that is what was meant there. In terms of the agreement in itself, there are two parts to the agreement. The one is the 1,000 rand, the 1,000 rand, implemented from the 1st of April. So the first pay date is the end of April, and that moves on. That is the normal pay date increase. The 1.5%, why it is only on the 1st of July, is because that is part of the traditional pay progression, which is only implementable on the 1st of July, and it hasn't changed. The only difference with that is that it is not only now the people that have performed, but everybody will get the 1.5%, because that was part of the agreement, so that every single person in the public service from levels 1 to 12 will get the 1.5%, which will be obviously increasing their pensionable salary. Insofar as whether unions mislead members or not, Ruben is going to talk about the PSA, but I want to say every single one of the unions has balloted members. And the ballots have come back very differently, where many of our members have come out in full support. And, of course, that is what determines whether we accept an agreement or not. And given the spectre of social media, it's much easier to ballot today than it was 5 years ago and so on. Ruben, do you want to take the questions around the PSA?
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe let me allude, Mukete, that negotiations is not an event, it's a process. You can't, when you start negotiations and when we had, or let me give it this way, Mukete, to say that when we table demands in March, we went through the part of negotiations and the process of SABC until when it underwent facilitation. When it went under facilitation on the around 10-11 of May, it's then that the employer called the unions into facilitation and frustrated the unions for 3 days without saying anything. That is when the PSA on 11 May lodged a dispute. And lodging a dispute is a process to try and find a solution up until the time that went for conciliation on the 3rd of June. And we received a certificate on non-resolution that allowed us to go and ballot members to say, since the employer is not giving anything, it's still at 0%, can we go on strike? As we prepare for strike, given the members' mandate, you get employer that says, look, I know that we are ready for a strike. Here is the offer that I want to table formally in the SABC. We are a democratic trade union. Once you get an offer, you must go back to members and say, here is an offer. And that's what the process has unfolded. It will be oblivious to try and say that the only way to resolve the process was only by means of strike. If you threaten a strike, the employer provides an offer. That offer is subjected to mandating by members, and that's exactly what we did as PSA. And I must emphasize that at this point in time, given the resolution, you cannot at this point in time find any trade union having any right to strike, because once matters that are being on the table are being resolved in this manner, you can no longer be in the position to strike. And I must emphasize, Mukete, that we took this matter to members, and the members are very fully aware that under the current conditions, that's why we call it interim, you cannot be in a position to fully have effective strike action given the regulations. And the fact that recently, in the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we had an unrest in the country, the likelihood of that particular strike being hijacked by crooks is very high. And it might not derive the intended purpose of a strike of workers. It might become something that it will be destroying the little that people have. And that is not what the unions are for. The unions are for the purpose of a strike intending to get what they want from the employer. So all those kind of conditions were considered by our members, democratically so, and they decided that under this condition, they are going to grab and run with the 1,000 rand in their pocket, And not forgetting the fact that clause 3.3 of the same resolution is very clear. It says that this is an interim arrangement and the demands that were tabled on the 1st of March are still recognized by the employer. And when we find time and space after this particular implementation, we are going to come back here in the PSABC because we know that there is no housing in this particular agreement. We know that there is no medical aid in this agreement. So the workers themselves, they know that for 2 years, electricity has increased by 15%. We have seen in April, petrol increased by R1. All these conditions made to this conclusion that we need something to keep on going with our lives. And something that keeps members going on with their lives is R1,000 monthly until all unions and employers in this PSABC find a solution to the demands that we have made during the 1st of March this year.
Yes, we've got another question from Lekani. What will happen to the 3% pay progression that is due to nurses this year?
The 3% that is due to the nurses, what will happen to that? Is the question.
In terms of the pay progression?
I'm not very clear on that angle there seems to be an answer there.
In regard to the 3% for the nurses.
Sorry.
Yeah, in regard to the 3% for the nurses, it's not only the nurses, even the police, they have a 3-year cycle for their salary progression. So it was very clear, the employer indicated that as for the nurses, they are going to get their, because they do it on a biannual basis. So they are going to be getting their 3%. Even those that do it on a 3-year cycle, they are going to get their 4.5%. So that one is very clear in terms of the salary progression is concerned. Thank you.
Can I just add on to that one? And that 3%. And that 3% we were talking about, that will be obtained in the sectoral agreement. There's Public Health Sectoral Bargaining Council. That's where it will be tabled and it will be phased out from that side. So it will be obtained from the Public Health.
Thank you, colleagues. This agreement is very clear. Here we're at the PSABC, and we've got sectoral councils. Each sectoral council has got its own resolutions that deal with PMDS. So what is going to happen is that this agreement is not going to interfere with resolutions in sectoral council. So in those sectoral councils, those pay progressions are still going to continue. If you can understand, our agreement now says it's not going to interfere with any existing regulations that we have now. So those nurses who qualify to get 3% this year are going to get it. The police that are qualified for 3% are also going to get theirs. So that is the answer to the question. Thank you.
And so we come out of that briefing. Transnet, port terminals declared force majeure today. That's according to a local online publication, MoneyWeb. This is said to have followed what Transnet described as an IT disruption that it experienced on the 22nd of July. MoneyWeb says it has in its possession the force majeure letter that Transnet port terminals sent to its customers, wherein it confirms that indeed it did experience a cyber attack, which it described as a security intrusion and sabotage, which affected the entire Transnet group. The force majeure notice applies to TPT's container terminals in the ports